The rain lashed against the streets of New York that night, while the lights of the skyscrapers blinked like silent witnesses to something terrible about to happen. Rebecca Sullivan, a 27-year-old ambitious young woman, was working late in the imposing Langley Enterprises building. The hallways were empty. The silence of the night was only interrupted by the sound of her heels clicking against the cold marble. She didn't know, but that would be the last time she walked freely for many years. In the CEO's office, the smell of whiskey mixed with the air conditioning. In the center of the room, a lifeless body on the floor. Blood spread across the expensive carpet. The phone still emitted a muffled tone as if someone was desperately trying to call for help, but it was too late. The door suddenly opens. 2 security guards rush in, guns drawn. And there she is, Rebecca, standing next to the body of the boss, her hand trembling, her eyes wide with pure horror. "No, it wasn't me." Her voice falters, but the weight of the scene screams the opposite. What happened next was a blur. Sirens cutting through the night, the sound of handcuffs clicking around her wrists, flashes from cameras of journalists eager for blood. Headlines splashed the next morning, "Executive Assistant Coldly Kills Boss." In court, the trial was swift. Overwhelming evidence. Fingerprints on the weapon. A threatening message sent from Rebecca's phone to the victim hours before the murder. Security camera footage showing her leaving the building minutes after the shot. The prosecution had no trouble. The jury didn't hesitate. And when the judge finally spoke, her tone was dry and final. "Rebecca Sullivan, you are sentenced to life imprisonment." The room seemed to spin. Her heart stopped. The life she knew was destroyed. But what she didn't know was that this was only the beginning. Because somewhere, someone smiled in the shadows. The true culprit. The one who orchestrated every detail, ensuring Rebecca paid for a crime she never committed. And for 20 long years she rotted behind bars. But fate had not yet played its final card. And then, something surprising happened. The steel gate slammed shut with a bang that echoed like a final sentence. Rebecca Sullivan was no longer a citizen. She was no longer a promising young woman with a bright future. Now she was just a number. A forgotten face among real criminals. The first day was a shock. The smell of mold and cheap disinfectant filled the air. The concrete walls seemed to squeeze her from all sides. The sound of cell doors slamming, of screams, of the harsh orders from the guards. In their weakness was a death sentence. And she learned that quickly. At first she tried to tell the truth. "I didn't do this. I was framed." But no one cared. The inmates laughed, the guards just rolled their eyes. To them, she was just another criminal denying the obvious. The days dragged on. The months turned into years. Rebecca was swallowed by the system, her hope withering each day. Her family disappeared. The few friends who tried to help her faded away with time. The world moved on. But she remained frozen in time. Prison changes people. Either you adapt or you crumble. Rebecca decided to survive. She learned to walk with her head held high, to show no fear. She made alliances when necessary, avoided enemies when possible. But one thing never changed, the certainty that she didn't belong in that place. And then, when she had lost all expectations, something happened. One ordinary afternoon, she was called to the warden's office. She thought it would be just another bureaucracy, maybe a lawyer who had given up on her. But when she entered, she saw a man in a dark suit, with a serious and determined look on his face. "My name is Ethan Carter. I'm a lawyer and I've just found something in your case, something that could change everything." Rebecca laughed without humor. How many times had she heard that before? "And what do you think you can do for me? It's been 20 years. The man stared into her eyes, and for the first time in 2 decades, Rebecca felt something she hadn't dared to feel in a long time. Hope. Because Ethan knew something. Something no one had noticed before. And that could be the key to her freedom. Rebecca stared at Ethan Carter from across the cold metal table. For a moment she wanted to ignore him. Lawyers had tried before. They all failed. They all gave up. But there was something different about Ethan, an urgency in his eyes. As if he knew something no one else knew. "What did you find?" she asked, trying not to sound hopeful. Ethan leaned forward, placing a worn file on the table filled with papers aged by time. "Something that's always been here but no one noticed, or no one wanted to notice. The forensic report states that your boss died at 11:45 p.m. Rebecca crossed her arms. "Yes, and I was there. What does that change?" The lawyer grabbed another piece of paper. "A security camera report from the building. You left the building at exactly 11:20 p.m., 25 minutes before the time of death." Rebecca froze. She felt her heart race. This can't be right. But it is. And there's more. I spoke with a former security guard at Langley Enterprises. He worked there for years, and on that night he saw someone entering the building after you left. But his testimony was never used in court. In fact, he disappeared from the case. Rebecca felt a chill run down her spine. Who did he see? Ethan took a deep breath as if about to cross into dangerous territory. He doesn't remember the face, but he said it was a man, and that he seemed to know the building's corridors very well, like he had been there many times before. The silence weighed heavily in the room. Rebecca closed her eyes for a moment, trying to process everything. For 20 years, she had lived believing there was no way out, that the truth was buried forever. But now, there was a crack. A small fissure in the wall of lies that had kept her trapped in that hell. She opened her eyes and met Ethan's determined gaze. What do I need to do? Ethan smiled slightly. Just tell me everything you remember about that night. Every detail. Because, Rebecca, we are reopening your case. And this time the truth could no longer be hidden. Rebecca spent 20 years reliving that night. Thousands of times. Every detail, every shadow, every sound. But now, every fragment of memory could be the key to her freedom. She took a deep breath, staring at Ethan. There was something strange about that night. Before I left the building, I heard my boss arguing with someone on the phone. He was nervous, talking about money, about something that could ruin everything. Ethan took quick notes. Did you recognize the name he was talking to? Rebecca shook her head. No. But he said something like, if you do this, you'll be condemning yourself too. Ethan furrowed his brow. Which means he was dealing with someone equally involved in whatever it was. He opened his folder and pulled out some documents. I investigated Langley Enterprises' business dealings at the time of the crime. Your boss was about to close $1 million deal with a mysterious partner. But suddenly, he backed out. The contract was canceled out of nowhere. Rebecca felt a chill. And you think this has to do with his death? Ethan nodded. I'm sure of it. But the most interesting part is the name that appears in several of these transactions. He turned one of the papers for her to see. And there, written in cold and impersonal letters, was a name that made Rebecca's blood run cold. Richard Langley, the owner of the company, the most powerful man in the city, and the last person anyone would dare accuse. Rebecca felt her heart race. You're saying the man who hired me might be the one who put me here? Ethan looked at her seriously. I'm saying that someone with enough power erased all the clues that could have exonerated you. And Langley has plenty of power. Rebecca clenched her fists. For years, she had swallowed the injustice, convinced herself there was nothing that could be done. But now the truth was right there, within reach. What do we do now? Ethan smiled slightly. Now we make noise. And that's exactly what they did. The next day, Ethan filed an official request to reopen the case. The news leaked. Newspapers and TV channels started talking about the woman who spent 20 years in prison for a crime she might not have committed. Rebecca's case was back in the spotlight. And then, something unexpected happened. An anonymous email came to Ethan. Just one line of text. You're digging where you shouldn't. Stop now or there will be consequences. Rebecca felt a chill. Does that mean we're on the right track? Ethan nodded. It means the game has just begun. But what they didn't know yet was that the enemy was much closer than they had imagined. The news spread like wildfire. Rebecca Sullivan's case could be reopened after new evidence. Headlines flashed on TV, social media, newspapers. For 20 years, the world had forgotten about her. Now, suddenly, everyone wanted to know the truth. But the closer Rebecca and Ethan got, the more dangerous everything became. The anonymous email wasn't the only warning. Ethan noticed that his office had been ransacked. Papers were missing. His computer had been hacked. Someone was trying to silence them. This just confirms what we already know, he said, throwing the papers on the table. Someone is afraid of what we might uncover. Rebecca took a deep breath. She was scared too. Not for herself, but for what she still didn't know. Then Ethan's phone rang. He answered and put it on speaker. A shaky, hoarse voice came from the other side. You want answers? I've got some. But you need to come alone. Tonight. 7th Street, number 142. Don't bring anyone. The call ended. Rebecca felt her stomach churn. It could be a trap. Ethan looked at her with a half smile. Or it could be our only chance. They went. The street was dark, abandoned. An old office building, windows covered with wooden planks. Ethan forced the door open. Inside, the smell of dust and old paper filled the air. In the center of the room, sitting in a metal chair, a man was waiting for them. Thomas Reeds, the former security guard of Langley Enterprises. The man who entered the building that night after Rebecca left. He looked older with deep bags under his eyes. His eyes widened when he saw Rebecca. I knew you'd come one day. Rebecca exchanged a quick glance with Ethan. Then why didn't you ever say anything? Thomas lowered his head. Because I would have died if I did. That man, he warned me. He said that if I spoke up, my family would pay the price. Rebecca felt her anger rise. Oh, who threatened you? Thomas hesitated. Then, slowly he lifted his eyes. And when he said the name, Rebecca felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. Jack Sullivan. Her heart stopped. For a second she thought she had heard wrong. What? Thomas swallowed hard. Your own brother, Rebecca. He was there that night. And he knew exactly what he was doing. An absolute silence. The air grew heavy. The world around her spun. And then the truth began to make sense. The missing evidence. The quick trial. The disappearance of the only man who could have cleared her. Jack had always been behind this. Rebecca felt her chest burn. The man she loved. The only one who promised to protect her. Ethan placed a firm hand on her shoulder. Rebecca, this changes everything. She closed her eyes. 20 years ago she had been betrayed. But now it was her turn to seek justice. And no one, not even Jack, could stop her. Rebecca felt her heart hammering against her chest. Thomas's voice echoed in her mind like distant thunder. Jack Sullivan. Her own brother. No, it couldn't be true. She stood up abruptly, pushing the chair back. You're lying. Jack would never do this to me. He was the only person who tried to help me. Thomas closed his eyes as if he had expected this reaction. I wish it were a lie. But I saw it. I saw it with my own eyes. Rebecca felt Ethan approach, his gaze full of caution. Thomas, tell me exactly what you saw that night. The former security guard ran his trembling hands over his face before continuing. When Rebecca left the building, everything seemed normal. But about 10 minutes later, a man entered. I only saw him briefly, but I remember his hair, his posture. It was Jack. I tried to ask him what he was doing there, but he ignored me and went straight to Mr. Miller's office. Rebecca closed her eyes. Her boss. The man who was found dead shortly after. Thomas continued. The next morning when I heard about the murder, I went straight to the police. But before I could give my statement, a man showed up at my house. He said he knew I had seen everything. He threatened me. Said if I spoke, my family would suffer. I was terrified, so I ran. Ethan crossed his arms. Who was this man? Thomas hesitated. I never knew his name. But he worked for Richard Langley. Langley's name again. The same man Ethan suspected to be behind everything. Rebecca felt the world spin. Langley, everything was connected. And then her brain screamed something she didn't want to admit. Jack was there that night. What else was he hiding? She pulled out her phone with trembling hands. It had been years since she had spoken to him. He had never visited her in prison. At first she thought it was pain, guilt, but now she knew it could be something much worse. She dialed the number. Called once, twice. Until, on the other end of the line. Hello? Jack's voice. Familiar. But now, tinged with something she had never noticed before. Fear. Jack, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. We need to talk. A heavy silence. Then he replied. Rebecca. I never wanted you to find out about this. And the line went silent. The silence was deafening. Ethan touched her shoulder. This confirms it. He knows something. Rebecca gripped the phone tightly. Then it's time to uncover the whole truth. Because now there was no turning back. Rebecca felt her hands trembling. The phone was still in her hand, but the call had ended. Jack knew. He had always known. For 20 years, she believed her brother was grieving, that the pain had kept him from visiting her in prison. But now she saw everything clearly. Jack wasn't suffering. Jack was hiding. What do we do now? Ethan asked, his eyes analyzing every detail of Rebecca's expression. She took a deep breath, trying to contain the whirlwind of emotions inside her. There was no more room for doubt. We pressure him, Rebecca said, determined. He's scared. And people who are scared make mistakes. Jack's house was in the suburbs of the city. A quiet place with nothing to draw attention. But to Rebecca, it was the scene of a deep betrayal. She and Ethan parked across the street. The lights were on. He was there. Are you ready for this? Ethan asked. Rebecca clenched her fists. I've never been more ready. They got out of the car and crossed the street. Rebecca knocked on the door. Once. Twice. Then the doorknob turned. The door opened just enough to reveal Jack's face. Tired eyes. Wrinkles of worry. But above all, guilt. Rebecca, he whispered. She felt a lump form in her throat but didn't back down. "Are you going to let me in or are you going to keep hiding?" Jack hesitated for a moment, then opened the door wider. "Just you," he said, casting a wary glance at Ethan. But Rebecca shook her head. "No. He comes in with me." Jack sighed and stepped back, allowing them both to enter. The living room was shrouded in shadows, illuminated only by a corner lamp. The place felt suffocating. Or maybe it was just the weight of the truth about to be spoken. Jack ran his hands over his face. "I know why you're here." Rebecca crossed her arms. "Then say it." "No lies, no beating around the bush. Why were you there that night?" Jack lowered his head. I tried to protect you." Rebecca's laugh was bitter. 20 years ago, when I was convicted of a crime I didn't commit. That was your way of protecting me?" Jack looked at her, his face consumed by desperation. "I had no choice. You don't understand. Then make me understand." Rebecca shouted, her voice thick with pain. Silence spread through the room. Jack closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and then he spoke the truth. "I owed money to Richard Langley. A lot of money. I got involved in the wrong business, and he trapped me. If I didn't do what he wanted, he was going to end me." Rebecca felt her heart pounding against her chest. "What did you do, Jack?" He looked at her, his eyes filled with tears. "Langley wanted your boss dead. He knew Miller was about to expose him for corruption, and that would destroy his business. So Langley sent someone to kill Miller that night. The air grew heavy, and I saw when it happened. I saw who pulled the trigger." Rebecca froze. "And who was it?" Jack trembled. "It was Michael Langley, Richard's son. He killed Miller, but his father cleaned it all up. He altered the cameras, paid off witnesses, destroyed evidence. And then, they found the blood on your uniform, Rebecca. And Langley decided you were the perfect scapegoat." Rebecca felt the world collapse around her. "You knew, all this time." Jack collapsed on the couch, burying his face in his hands. "I tried to stop it, but Langley threatened me. He said that if I spoke, he would have you killed in prison. I did what I could. I begged them to give you a lighter sentence, but..." His voice faltered. "I failed." Rebecca looked at Ethan, her eyes burning. "I was just a pawn in this game. They set everything up. And you," she turned to Jack, her face filled with pain. "You let it happen." Jack sobbed. "I just wanted to protect you." Rebecca took a step back. "You didn't protect me. You buried me alive." Silence filled the room. Until Ethan spoke, his voice sharp as a blade. "If this is true, we have a name. Michael Langley." Jack raised his face, desperation in his eyes. "If you mess with him, you'll die." Rebecca wiped away her tears. "Maybe. But now, I have nothing left to lose." Ethan nodded. "Then let's end this." Rebecca stared at her brother one last time. "You can keep hiding, Jack, but I'll seek justice." And with that, she turned her back. Because now the real enemy had a name. And this story was far from over. Rebecca felt the weight of the truth crushing her chest. Michael Langley. The name of the real killer now burned in her mind. 20 years. 20 years stolen. And all because a powerful man wanted to cover up his dirt and used her as a scapegoat. She left Jack's house with Ethan by her side, their steps firm, determined. Justice could not wait any longer. "What's the plan?" Ethan asked, breaking the silence. Rebecca looked at him, her eyes shining with an intensity he had never seen before. "If Michael is the killer, someone else knows. And that person will talk." They spent the night gathering evidence, cross-checking information, retracing the web of lies Langley had built over the years. The name that kept appearing in the records and business dealings, and behind the scenes was Nathan Collier, a former Langley family lawyer. He had been involved in deals that mysteriously disappeared when Rebecca was convicted. The next morning, Ethan parked the car in front of a luxurious building downtown. "He lives here," Ethan said, checking the lawyer's file. Rebecca got out of the car and stared at the entrance. If Nathan knew the truth, she would make him talk. She rang the intercom and waited. Nothing. She rang again. "Who is it?" The rough voice came from the other side. "Rebecca Sullivan. And I know about Michael Langley." A heavy silence filled the air. Then the door unlocked. They quickly made their way up to the apartment. When Nathan opened the door, he looked like a man haunted by his own past. "I shouldn't have let you in," he murmured. Rebecca stepped inside anyway. "Then why did you?" Nathan sighed, ran a hand over his face and closed the door. "Because I'm tired of running." Rebecca crossed her arms. "You helped Langley bury me alive. Now you're going to unearth the truth." Nathan laughed without humor. "You have no idea the danger you're in, and you have no idea what I've already been through. I won't stop until I clear my name." Nathan looked at her for a long moment, then walked over to a safe embedded in the wall. His hands trembled as he turned the combination. Click. He pulled out a yellowed envelope full of documents. This is what's left of the evidence. Rebecca took the papers and began to read. Her heart raced. It was a confession agreement made 20 years ago. An agreement Michael Langley signed. He admitted it, Rebecca whispered, feeling her hands tremble. Nathan nodded. Yes. But Langley used his power to hide it all. This confession was sealed and archived. No one ever knew. Until now. Rebecca stared at the document as if holding a piece of her own destiny. And then a thought arose. If this leaked, if this was revealed. Ethan, she said, her voice firm. I want this in the media. No. Nathan's eyes widened. Are you crazy? If you expose this, Langley will have you killed. Rebecca smiled. Then let him try. Because now, he can't silence me anymore. The clock of vengeance was ticking. And Langley had nowhere left to run. Time seemed to move at a different pace. Rebecca felt her heart pounding in her chest as Ethan drove through the city. Michael Langley was about to face the truth. The signed confession was in her hands, a direct ticket to his downfall. Are you sure about this? Ethan asked, keeping his eyes on the road. Rebecca looked out the window. The city's horizon stretched before her, a silent reminder of the time she had lost. 20 years stolen. She closed her eyes for a moment and then replied firmly, for the first time in a long time, I'm sure of something. The Langley Enterprises building rose like a fortress of power. But today it would be the tomb of an empire built on lies. Rebecca and Ethan entered the lobby without hesitation. Rebecca Sullivan to speak with Michael Langley, she told the receptionist. The woman hesitated. Mr. Langley is not available at the moment. Rebecca smiled, but her eyes were as sharp as blades. Then tell him that if he doesn't meet with me, this signed confession will be in every newspaper in the country in exactly 30 minutes. The receptionist turned pale and picked up the phone. Minutes later, a security guard appeared. Miss Sullivan, this way. She and Ethan followed the luxurious hallway to a private elevator. The silence was deafening. When the doors opened on the top floor, Michael Langley was already waiting for them. He was standing behind an imposing desk, dressed in an impeccable suit, his face expressionless. But his eyes betrayed the fear. Rebecca, he said with a forced smile. What an unpleasant surprise. Rebecca walked up to him and threw the papers on the desk. This confession was buried, but I dug it up. You signed it. You admitted to killing Miller. And I paid for your crime. Michael picked up the papers and read them quickly. Then he let out a dry laugh. And you think this is enough to take me down? He leaned back in his chair. I'm Michael Langley. I can bury this again. Rebecca crossed her arms. Maybe you could, if it wasn't already in the hands of the press right this minute. Michael froze. For a second, his mask slipped. Ethan pulled out his phone and showed him the screen. The news was already spreading. Headlines exploded on news websites. Michael Langley, heir to $1 billion empire, confessed to a murder 20 years ago and concealed evidence. The color drained from his face. You didn't? Rebecca leaned over the desk. I did. And you know what else I did? I recorded this conversation. She turned the phone toward him. The recording was playing. Every word spoken, every drop of arrogance from Michael Langley was now evidence against him. Desperation grew in his eyes. You can't do this to me? Rebecca smiled. I already have. Michael suddenly stood up and pulled open a drawer, but Ethan was faster. He drew a gun and pointed it at Langley. Don't even think about it. The office door was abruptly opened. Armed police officers entered. Michael Langley, you're under arrest for the murder of Christopher Miller, obstruction of justice, and falsification of evidence. The billionaire tried to react, but the officers subdued him. Rebecca watched as they handcuffed the man who had destroyed her life. For 20 years he had been untouchable. But now, the game was over. Before he was taken away, Michael looked at her, his eyes burning with hatred. I should have killed you back then. Rebecca smiled. But you didn't. And now, I'm the one who's free. The sun shone in the sky as Rebecca left the building. How do you feel? Ethan asked. She took a deep breath, feeling the fresh air. Free. And for the first time in 2 decades, she truly was. And so, after 20 years of pain, injustice, and struggle, Rebecca finally gained her freedom. But at what cost? The lost time would never return, and the scars of that nightmare would remain forever. Justice was served, but is it truly over? Or can the shadows of the past still demand a price? What would you do if you were Rebecca? Would you have the courage to face such a powerful man? Leave your opinion in the comments. And if you like this emotional story, don't leave just yet. Here on the channel we have many more stories full of mystery, twists, and surprising endings. Click on the next video and continue this journey with us.